And congratulations, everybody. You made it through the holiday week, 2026. Wow. What's going on? This is just craziness. Who can believe it? But here we are. It's Friday. And of course, this is the Food Safety Chat Live. And first off, thank you for being here. It's amazing. Your dedication to food safety and quality assurance and making sure that all the goods that we enjoy over the holidays are safe. Awesome job, Colleen and I definitely appreciate all you're doing. If you're new to the chat, welcome. Pull up a chair. My name is Brian Armentrout with Culture Advisory Group, and this is, of course, Food Safety Chat Live in every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, or in the wee hours of 7 a.m. if you're on the West Coast. We live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube and have a conversation around food safety and all the things that work with that. And this is one of the things that you'll notice here if you're new is this is a conversation. This is meant to be sharing of information because food safety, not a point of competition. The consumers don't care. They expect all food to be safe. They expect all food to be awesome. And you're part of that. And we appreciate all that you do. So everybody's kind of filing in here. So Michelle's here. Hi, welcome in Des Moines, Iowa. Very nice. So one of the things that we love to do here on the chat, good morning, Brett. Happy New Year to you, sir, is we love to list out where we're at in the world. And I am in Loveland, Colorado, where it's currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit. And I am joined by Colleen Jarrett, founder at NutriLabel Consulting. How are you doing today, Colleen?
Living the dream.
Absolutely. Where are you located at in the world?
I'm in Seattle. Lovely, sunny, not rainy at all. Seattle.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Cheryl, good morning. Bonna is here as well. Brianna. Wow, this is awesome. It's great. I mean, the dedication to this crew around food safety and all that we do showing up here on January 2nd, getting the year off to a good start. And we appreciate all that you do. So one of the things that we love to do here on the chat, Colleen, to get started is we like to have a ceremonial drink of your favorite beverage. So everybody, please join us. Cheers. And that's a very pretty mug and color coordinated too. Look at that. Very nice. So we got a ton to go over today. And so let's kind of dive in here. But first off, one of the things that we love to do here on the chat before we get started, whenever there's a new guest on, is number one, thank you for coming on the chat. We appreciate you sharing your perspective, Colleen. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So Colleen Jarrett, I started a consulting business called NutriLabel Consulting LLC, and I'm doing regulatory labeling consulting mostly and nutrition consulting. So that's like claims, all of your labeling requirements, making sure everything's GRAS. A little bit about me. So I have been in the industry for about 19 years. Most of that time was at Starbucks, and I worked on everything at Starbucks that has the Starbucks and some things that didn't have the Starbucks name on them. So if you have any questions about that, happy to answer. And I have a background in culinary nutrition. I thought I was going to be a personal chef, and then I got into regulatory in a weird way and loved it and have stayed for the last 19 years.
Nice. That's one of the interesting things in life is it always takes these weird bends and turns, and you never end up quite where you think you're going to go. When you're young, you're like, oh yeah, I got everything planned out and I know exactly what I'm going to do. And then life has other plans for all of us. It's kind of the way it works out. For sure. So one of the things, Colleen, that we love to do here on the chat is I love to torture my guests with the dad joke. Right here, the dad joke. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So, Colleen, why is it cheaper to throw a New Year's Eve party at a haunted house?
I don't know. Why is it cheaper?
Yes, it's a very interesting thing because invite the ghosts because they'll bring all the booze. Booze. Moving on. So
you're really yucking it up over there.
Yeah. The best part of the dad joke is the groan scale, right? The higher the groan scale, the better the dad joke, right? So if you can picture the 10-year-old daughter rolling their eyes and walking away, then you know that that's a good dad joke. Michelle, they all agree here. So one of the things that we do here on the chat, so for the regulars calling, they kind of know how this mechanisms works in the process and the pre-call and how we prepare and get ready. And we had a really good conversation earlier this week around regulatory and food safety and quality assurance and all the different things that go on here. And the topic and the title for the chat that came up for today was the white, black, and gray of food regulatory and labeling compliance. And a lot of times people don't realize that. And it's one of the things that we talk about here on the chat quite a bit is there's in food safety, and it's really the same in your area too. There's kind of two main buckets that you're looking at. On the food safety side is like, okay, we have an undeclared allergen, recall, right? That's a pretty easy call. Food quality is we're getting higher levels of complaints for taste on our product. Our consumers aren't liking our new formulation. That's a quality complaint. It's not going to cause a recall, but it's not good either. And one of those decisions is pretty easy to make. The other decision is more of a business decision. And in your area, Colleen, it's very much the same, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I had a pretty good example I was thinking about where, you're not required to call out the source of flavors. But a lot of times we were seeing customer questions come through asking, what are in those natural flavors? Where are those coming from? And so sometimes proactively, if possible, we would put natural strawberry flavor. And so we would get hopefully fewer of those questions and it would be more transparent. Did we have to do it? Certainly not, but it was the right thing to do.
Right. Oh, and that's a really good point because that's in quality assurance. That's a tool I would use all the time with what type of consumer feedback are we getting? A lot of times consumers will hear something out in the marketplace and then they'll be confused. They'll be like, what's this things I'm hearing about toxic red dye or things like this? And so they'll call and they're genuinely curious. And the more of those things that you can explain up front, it's just more transparent and easier for the consumer. One of the sayings an old CEO for a company I worked with had that I took with me, Colleen, was be easy to do business with. And it kind of translates in this area too. So if the consumers are worried about something, be proactive and explain that. And if it's something that they don't want in the product, there's a way potentially that you can get rid of that in the product and change that around. And we're definitely seeing a lot of that going on right now. We'll talk more about that too, on that side too. But one of the things, and this is part of our theme with this here as well too, is early engagement in the process. In a food company, the lifeblood of a food company is new products, coming up with new innovations, new and improved. What are the consumers looking for? And with that, Colleen, I refer to that as design control and change management. And for the design control process, that's really that process of how does a company come up with new ideas for products? How do they develop those, build them, create them, and launch them? And a lot of times in quality and regulatory labeling groups, we're on the backside of things, aren't we? We're kind of at the end of the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's that age-old adage of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If they loop us in a little bit earlier, we can help them get where they need to go. And in my career, I've always tried to say yes, if, and you can't really do that when the product is already finalized. And so that's one of the things I try and talk to my clients about is, hey, if you let me know what you want to say earlier on, I can give that guidance to the developers and then they can develop to that claim versus us trying to shove it into the claim after the fact, which is possibly we're not able to do it, or it gets into a little bit of a risky territory because it's not quite where it needs to be.
Yeah, and if you want to be successful in a food company in this area, is you need to be involved really early in the process. And there's a big chunk of the educational piece of that. And we'll talk about that here a little bit more as well. But really, it's getting into that upfront process because a lot of times the groups that aren't involved with the manufacturing side of things, the operational side, don't understand what goes on. So if you're in marketing or sales, maybe you go to the plants every now and then on a tour or something like that, but you really don't know what goes on. I refer to this as the magic black box. And from their perspective, they know that they want to launch a new product and they put together teams and they do trials and they do consumer feedback and all this type of stuff, create formulations, do trials, and then it goes to manufacturing. So there's inputs that go in, something happens in the magic black box, and then the product just pops out the other side. Ta-da, it's wonderful. But they don't understand the ramifications of some of those impacts on the product. So for example, one of the things, I'm sure you saw this a lot too, is there's a belief in the marketing group that the more certifications you have on the product equals more sales. And is that true? I don't know about that. But you have kosher, organic, non-GMO, vegan, cruelty-free, right? The list goes on and on and on. And those companies that have those certifications are businesses. And they're in the business to make money. And they want to do everything that they can to get those labels on the product. The way I would communicate this to the marketing groups and things of this would be like, the complexity you're adding to the business for every one of these things you add to the product is not additive, it's multiplicative. So it's like this logarithmic curve of complexity you're doing to the products. Even something simple like, let's say that you decide that you want an organic line in your plants. Now you've got non-organic certified and certified organic products. Well, now your entire run orders have changed. It's like, oh, now you're the scheduler. I always need to run my organic products first, and then I run my standard products after, so I don't get cross-contamination and the auditors stay happy and all these type of things. Well, now you've just limited the ability of the plant to manufacture correctly. So let's say that you need to cut back into the production and you need more organic products because order increase. Now you've got to shut down and clean everything, and it's extremely expensive. And that's just one certification. So for every one of those that you add, Colleen, it just makes it that much harder for the plant to make it right, doesn't it?
It's certainly a complication. And I mean, then you add into that all the other claims, because again, I think sometimes marketers think that adding more claims creates a more marketable product, but sometimes that'll turn people off. And kind of going back to vegan, I've seen vegan go around and around a couple of times. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And what I've seen over and over again is you go through all the trouble of certifying something as vegan, and then they find out that people think it's going to taste bad because that's an association they have with vegan. So then it went into plant-based. Well, what is plant-based? I don't know. And do you come up with a standard for that? Do you find a third-party certifier? What does it even mean?
Yeah, there's a claim out now for a soda that I see on YouTube where they do ads, and they're claiming it's healthier. It's soda. Healthier than what? It's like, and I look at that, I'm like, how can they even make that claim? It's just like they're just asking for trouble. But we'll talk more about that side of it too. Jay makes a good point here too. Is stage gate. Oh, stage gates are so important. And I would add on to this as well is having a good product, a good project manager. Oh, so important. People always think that their idea is a good idea. It's just human nature. And it may be a good idea, but it may not be the right idea for the company. It may be the wrong time for that. There may be too many things going on. And companies try and jam too many things in. Stage gate in a nutshell, think of it like a giant funnel. So you got a whole bunch of ideas up at the top. Some will make it, some won't. You have to pick. Every company has limited resources. And if you want to do things well, you have to be able to focus on those things. And that's where in food safety and regulatory, where we get tripped up a lot of times, is because they ask us to do too many things and you don't have time to do the checks, or you don't have the ability to really think about what they're asking to be done in those variants. And it can cause downstream ripple effects back to the magic box thing. Michelle, soda promotes gut health. Oh, yay. Okay, sure, marketing people. But one of the things I definitely wanted to kind of switch gears over to here, Colleen, is some of the main areas and confusions out there that we see, especially right now. We see a lot of stuff in the news right now. And I hear this question quite a bit. is this grass thing. Yeah, okay, I've got a house. I've got grass out front. What is grass? What is this thing?
Yeah. So I just want to preface it with that I'm no grass expert. I know kind of the tip of the iceberg of what grass is. So grass stands for generally recognized as safe. And it's the way that the US food system and supplements and drugs, I think it's drugs too, but I know definitely food and supplement, figures out whether an ingredient is safe for the purpose that you're going to use it. And that's really the most important thing to think about. I have had lots of clients come to me and say, can we use this? And I'm like, what are you going to do with it? Well, we're not sure yet. Well, come back to me when you're sure, because that is what the GRAS assessment is based off of. It's not just based off of the ingredient, it's for the purpose. So a really good example I can think of that's come up more recently is, what was it? In 2016, I was working in product development just for a little bit, and we kept working with butterfly pea flower because it is an acid indicator, and it would do these really cool things where if you put acid into it, it would change from blue to purple, and it was just like a really fun kind of theatrical thing to do. And still having my regulatory hat on, hopefully nobody takes offense to this, but I would lovingly call it liver failure tea, because we did not have a GRAS assessment done on it. And there was a history of it being used, I think, in Thailand, but it really wasn't approved for use in the US for a food. And I did my best. I ended up going back to the regulatory team after my little dalliance in product development. But fun fact, in the last year or two, butterfly pea flower has been grassed. It has been evaluated for safety as a food colorant. So you're going to see that in some of the natural food colors that are coming through with the talks of banning artificial dyes.
Interesting. Butterfly? Where's the butterfly part come from?
Butterfly pea flower. So it's a purple flower, and when you steep it, it has this beautiful, brilliant blue color, and you can change the color depending on the pH of the water, or the whatever you're putting into it. So it's really interesting. And then what they're doing for the colorant that it's approved for is you'll work with one of the natural food color companies, and they'll ship it to you similar to all of the other fruit and vegetable colors that are out there. Yeah, it's a really cool product, and they can also make it pH stable, because as we know, we're probably going to want to acidify a lot of stuff, but we don't want to change the color. So, yeah.
Interesting. So this is a good point then. So under the GRAS system, so it's the material, the ingredient that you're looking at, and the context of what you want to use it in. So if you're looking at some new novel ingredient and you want to add it into your cheese, and you want cheese that changes colors, you need to go through that process. So how does that work then? You petition FDA, or what is that?
Yeah. Again, not an expert, but I know enough to be dangerous. So that is definitely something that your clients will ask is, well, then let's get it GRAS. And you say, okay, well, the process for getting something GRAS is you have to first have information that supports the safety of that. You put together a dossier and you present it to a panel of scientists with that subject matter expertise. And the FDA lays out all of those requirements. And if you want, you can also send a notice once that scientific panel has looked it over and said, yeah, it's safe for the use. You can send a notice to the FDA, and the FDA will keep that notice on file, which also becomes public. Fun fact, you don't have to send a notice to the FDA. So there is a little bit of a secret for you for a little bit, because you've put all of that money into substantiating the use of that ingredient. And that is what they're talking about right now, removing. So it's not necessarily that you can do away with self-GRAS. It's doing away with self-grass without notification of the FDA. At least that's what I've read so far. And I
Right.
also have a link that I can share with you guys after of the proposed rule of removing that ability.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So with it, it's kind of similar to the dietary supplement world then, in that you can have different ingredients. So as opposed to food, dietary supplements slightly different with their regs, in that the dietary supplement company is responsible for the veracity and safeness of the ingredients they're using in their supplements and claims in the dietary world. Ooh, yeah. But essentially they have to provide the proof, and then FDA can decide if something happens, whether or not that's significant or not. It's the same on food for grass as well. The grass process itself, yeah, it's a very interesting process. I've been through it as well, and a lot of times food companies don't necessarily want to let FDA know, because then the competitors can see it. And it's almost like issuing a patent. So it's like, oh, look how they're using this butterfly pea protein. Oh, that's interesting. We should start doing that too and beat them to market. So a lot of times companies are hesitant to do that as well. You also have to figure if they remove the self-certification process and the attestations, that this will probably grind to a halt. The group at FDA that does the review on this is small. It's not a bunch of people. And they're generally backlogged as it is. So now all of a sudden everybody has to go through this process. It's going to take years for people to get GRAS certification. So any type of new novel usage of things is really going to grind to a halt. Now overlay that with what you had mentioned, Colleen, which was artificial dyes and colors and other things that are definitely in the spotlight right now. Food companies are scrambling to figure out new ways to remove different types of dyes. The example that always comes to mind for me on this is red colors. So strawberry yogurt, for example. Very hard to get that right color, because a lot of times when you heat treat the yogurt and you have that dye in there, it ends up this kind of weird grayish blah color, which just looks terrible. And so much of eating and enjoying food is how it looks. And it just looks terrible. So I can imagine that people in R&D are scrambling to try and find alternatives right now.
Yeah, I have a fun story. A few years ago, the company I was working with had removed all FD&C colors proactively because it wasn't something their consumers wanted. But fun fact, one of the natural colors is carmine and cochineal extract, and those come from the cochineal beetle. And so although natural, there is this not very scientific but ick factor of ew, bugs. And so, the developers are scientists, regulatory scientists, food safety folks are scientists. There's nothing wrong with cochineal extract or carmine, but I think a vegan was looking at something, a label, and they saw it and posted it on Twitter, and then the CEO gets all upset. Who put bugs in our food? Aren't you food safety? Aren't you supposed to keep bugs out of our food? And lots of conversations with executives about, well, you asked us to remove artificial dyes, and this is a natural dye. So it feels like sometimes you can't win. You're doing exactly what they asked you to. They're like, well, not that. Well, how was I supposed to know?
Yeah, it's kind of like that old saying: is if you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing no one. And and this goes back to, again, what we were talking about just a little bit ago, is if you have a bazillion certifications and little stamps of whatever on your packaging, odds are somebody's not going to like that. So to your point, so if you're vegan certified, now all of a sudden you're crossing those guys. Well, it's like, so I worked in sugar refining, and carbon is used to filter the sugar, and it removes the color and makes it that nice, pretty white color that we like. And there's different sources of carbon for that process. There's, wood carbon, and there's bone char carbon. And we used to get that question all the time from consumers. It's like, I'm vegetarian and vegan, and you guys use bone char in your filtering process. And you have to be aware of these things up front, because if you create an adversarial relationship with some of these groups, they're coming after you, and they can be quite vindictive in some cases. So you have to be very aware of that and be upfront. To your point earlier, if you're explaining this stuff, then it's clear. So you need to make sure that those things come out. So being upfront and involving our groups in the product development process early on, super, super critical. So the way I always think of it, Colleen, is that I want the R&D scientists who's sitting at that bench coming up with new ideas for the marketing people, that I'm a little bug in their ear, that I've already kind of coached them in advance of the things that they need to be watching out for. So for me in food safety, it's like, don't add a new allergen. No new allergens allowed. If you want to add a new allergen, we got to go to a whole new manufacturing plant, probably a co-packer. Not a good idea. You need to be thinking about that when you're making these new products. So you're kind of hopefully steering them in the right direction. So from your perspective, are there any things like that you want the R&D guys to avoid if you can help it?
I think it's just keeping the lines of communication open. I know when I was working for other companies that had an R&D department, I almost created like a Colleen Jarrett hotline and tried to create a situation where no question was a bad question. And, let's get a coffee. Let's have regular connects to just see, oh, what are you working on? That's so interesting. I'm just trying to stay on top of whatever the trends are. But, I had a little bit of an ulterior motive to also find out, what are you working on and how can I get ahead of it so that I can help you?
Very smart. And I love how you approach that, because what do people love talking about? Themselves, right? So if you show an interest in what they're doing, and you're doing it genuinely, of course, they're going to be happy to have that communication with you, and that involves yourself. Because part of this is you need to be proactive as well. You just can't sit back in your office and expect people to come to you, and then when they don't, you get mad. Part of that is your own fault. You need to get out there. One of the things that we talk about here on the chat quite a bit is get out of your bubble. You are part of the company. The only way the company makes money is if we have happy customers who pay money for what we make. And we're part of that process. We're a support function in those areas. We help the company do that efficiently. And the quicker we can do that process of getting products to market, the better off the company is going to be. And part of what I would always teach these teams is having good process controls and design control mechanisms in the company helps it do these things faster. And it gets back to your point at the beginning of, you don't find out about a project until a week before launch and you have to kill it. And then everybody's mad at you and you're like, right? So you need to be very proactive on those fronts. Another area, Colleen, that kind of dovetails in with this, but it causes also a lot of reactionary pain in these areas, is change management. And this is where a lot of the actual day-to-day grunt work happens. So a new marketing person comes in charge of a company. What's the first thing they always do, Colleen? They change every single label, don't they?
Yep, exactly. Because they want to put their stamp on it and show I was here. And I mean, that's a wonderful thing. If that's how they want to show up, we have to kind of support them in that. But we have to set proper expectations. If you do this, yes, if. That's the thing I love to say. Yes, if. And sometimes the yes, if is if the laws of physics were different. But, you still say yes, if, because the way that you frame it, I think, makes all the difference.
Yes. And that's a good point. And this gets back to my comment earlier on. This is a business, and business decisions need to be made. It may be worth the trouble. It may be part of a bigger picture. And the more we understand about that, the more we can help reach those objectives. But also communicating resource allocation. In that there's only so many things that can be done in a given week. And if you push too much in, then mistakes are going to happen. And that's where things really fall apart. But the change management process is where a lot of the risk happens in companies. And especially back to your CEO comment earlier. Oh yeah, don't do it that. Yeah. They don't understand how much work goes into doing these things. I remember one time we were having a meeting with the CEO at a prior company. We were coming up with a new flavor. It was like a chocolate flavored cream cheese or something. And we're like, okay, yeah, well, we can do this project and get it all started. And we're talking about the timeline and stuff. And he starts getting mad. And he's like, what are you talking about? And we kind of look at him. He's like, well, just put the chocolate in the cream cheese. That's all you got to do. And we're like, oh my God, he has no idea. Right? So part of this is being able to understand the perspective of these different groups. And when you're dealing with the CEO and the senior leadership team, they don't necessarily understand what you're doing, and they may not need to, but they need to understand that these things are being done for a reason. And sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot. So for example, and I talked about this on the chat before, if it normally takes, let's say we have a really good process and it takes 8 weeks for a change management to go through on a major project. And the CEO of the company says, no, this is a major priority for the company, all hands on deck. We need to get this done immediately. 8 weeks is too slow. So everybody goes, okay. And they roll up their sleeves and they work weekends, and they may not have all the supplier information they need. And we'll wait for that kosher cert. And everything gets done kind of, and the product launches in 4 weeks. Well, now the CEO goes, that 8 week deadline
now it can
was
be done in 4 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So now everything is at 4 weeks, and you're in a serious problem if that happens, because now the mistakes are going to pile up because they don't understand what's taking place in that magic black box and all the different things that need to happen. So, and again, this goes back to what our theme is developing for our caller today, is that communication piece of those things need to happen. It's not as simple as putting the chocolate in the cream cheese. No, it doesn't work that way. Lots of boxes need to be ticked. And a lot of times, Colleen, when I see allergen recalls, it's like so-and-so company is having a recall for mislabeling and an allergen. Almost every time it's because of the label, isn't it? Something got missed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it's also because somebody decided to change the supplier for something, and maybe pine nuts were in this new pesto and there wasn't pine nuts in the old pesto. And they said, well, I mean, how big of a deal can it be? No. It can't be an allergen. Like, no, it says nuts in the name. It is a pine, or maybe it was listed as pignoles, which is the Italian name. And they're like, yep, no nuts. And, you just move forward, and then the regulatory person sees it and goes, oh no. So yeah, I think most regulatory folks have been there at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing that on the marketing side is, if you're having all these different changes going on, and if you work in marketing, you want to be at the forefront of the consumer's mind with new and improved and new flavor and limited edition and all these type of things. And especially this time of year, it's even more dangerous from our viewpoint, because all these changes are happening so fast. And line changeovers are a potential risk. Getting the right packaging, lead times on that packaging. And a lot of times too, what will happen is the actual end date for that packaging gets missed. So you have what we call soft and hard stops. And a hard stop would be, okay, we're going to run this packaging up to this date and then we stop. And if there's leftover packaging, well, we'll eat that cost. And a lot of times the marketing people don't want to pay for that. It's like, well, no, you're the one that caused this. You should pay for it. But a lot of times the operation guys get stuck with it. A soft stop would be, okay, we're going to run this packaging design until it runs out. Now, when you get into the holiday, you end up with lots of changes and leftover rolls and these type of things. And a lot of times in a production facility, number one, busy time of year, making all that product for all the holiday parties and what have you, production is way up. They're running low on film. The operations guys goes in the warehouse and they go, oh, look at that. There's another roll of film hidden back here. I'll use that. And recall, because it was the old packaging that didn't have that. Because part of it as well is, if somebody's got to eat the cost for that packaging, and it ends up being operations, they'll just stick it in the warehouse, because then they don't have to pay for it. They don't have to write that off because it just sits there. Well, now that's a huge risk. So I would always put rules in place like, no, you can't do that. If it's obsolete packaging, it has to be written off and it has to be paid down. You cannot store it in the warehouse and just wait for somebody to forget about it and then depreciate it after you're gone. Nope, can't do that. And because that's a huge risk from our perspective, from a regulatory and a food safety standpoint. All of these little nuances. People don't necessarily realize packaging in a lot of cases is the most expensive thing in the product, and people don't want to pay for that if you don't use it. So that change management process is just as important as the overall R&D process. All of these little things that are being thrown at us all the time. And I would think probably from your perspective, Colleen, I would imagine that from a workload standpoint, that was probably 60, 70% of what you were doing relative to products. And then the remainder would be actual new stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about, this is not a happy topic, but sometimes you'll see political changes. So for example, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that was a lot of our sunflower lecithin and sunflower oil. And so if we had any products with sunflower lecithin or sunflower oil, they had to be reformulated. And so it's interesting how those global events can really affect how which products can get to your product. So, or which ingredients can get to your product. I also ran into, I did some international regulatory for a bit. And, 1 year you can send stuff to Russia, and I think it was mostly Russia and Turkey. And then there was some political changes, and we had to send it to the UK first, and then they would send it to Russia and Turkey. So it's so interesting how, the relationships with different countries will even change how product is regulated and how strictly it's regulated. Yeah. What country is the product coming from? And you would have more luck getting it in if it was coming from the Netherlands or one of the EU countries than you would if it was coming from the US.
Yeah, we were talking about that last week, is Chinese honey. So Chinese honey has an incredibly bad reputation, and they deserve it. And so they would then ship honey to Vietnam, relabel it, and then ship it to the US. And so it took us a little bit to figure out what was going on, but then we did. So food fraud and changing of sourcing and things like this is always huge, this is another big area of labeling and compliance that gets people all knotted up as well. Country of origin is product of USA. Okay, well, every ingredient comes from somewhere else in the world, but they kind of make it in the US. So then they say product of USA. There's been a lot of push for origin labeling. And that's really confusing, is what does that mean? Now, also then that creates labeling issues for larger companies that have plants. Let's say you have a plant in Toronto and a plant in Buffalo. Well, now what's the origin of those different products and the ingredients? It gets really confusing.
Yeah, I was just thinking about a product that I was managing, and it was freeze-dried fruit. And so, as you can imagine, the country that the fruit was grown in would change depending on the year, because and we needed to have a country of origin on there. Well, it varied. And my procurement folks were so upset that we were going to have to change the label when we switched the origin where the fruit was coming from. They're like, well, can't we just say or list out all the countries? And I'm like, no, that's not something that is written out in the regulations. And so it's always a little bit of a challenge explaining the why and getting people to buy into it. There is a reason for this, and part of it is traceability, but part of it is also, if you're going to be sending stuff all over the world, sometimes they don't allow strawberries from Brazil for whatever reason. And so those countries need to know.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So cocoa, for example, is another one of those country of origin things. Oh, that changes all the time. I remember from my past to a marketing issue that we changed course on this because I was able to avoid this disaster. Is the marketing team was like, well, we want to make our product look super premium. So we want to be essentially hyper specific on particular ingredients. Our product is only made from the finest vanilla from Madagascar or something like this. And it's like, yeah, you know where this is going. And And I'm like, well, hold on here, guys. If we do that, that means we can only ever put in vanilla from Madagascar. What happens if they have another massive storm that goes through there and wipes out the entire crop and we have to use vanilla from somewhere else? Oh, yeah. Now we can't make products because, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. Now that product will be mislabeled because now you're essentially it's fraud. If it's not vanilla from Madagascar and you say it is, that's fraud. And I'm not going to be responsible for that. So once they understood the ramifications of that, they backed off from adding that claim. So it was like, okay, good. So which really kind of gets into our next point here is kind of the regs around this. And a lot of times, I'll just do this as a refresher point for everybody, is Congress passes a law, it gets signed into law. That's not what we follow. We follow regulations. So the regulations then are written by the agencies, and there's a whole lot going on with that right now around Looper Bright and all of that. And that's another conversation. But the regulations then are really what we follow. But the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, so all you have to do is read a recall. And FDA always has at the beginning of a recall their justification for that recall. And it falls under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act into two areas. And that's misbranding and adulteration. Always one of those two things. So adulteration, that means that food is not food. It is not fit for human consumption. Mislabeling means essentially what I just said, fraud. There's something there that is not correct relative to what that is. So it could be, to your point, Colleen, from some of these conversations, is you have an ingredient in there that's wrong. That's mislabeling. And it may not cause illness or things like that, but that product is in violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the law. And the regulations are how we implement that. So for labeling, there are different kind of areas then within the regs where that labeling information is. And it's not like FSMA or something like that, right? 21 CFR, 117. It's pretty straightforward. There's used to be 110, 117. You've got you've got your FSMA stuff in there, and you got foreign supplier verification in a different area and all that. Where do the regulations for labeling hang out at? Where are those guys?
Yeah. So in the US, we've got two different entities that are regulating labels. Most of the time, we're going to be working with the FDA, and that'll be in 21 CFR 101. And then we're also working with the USDA, that's mostly meat products. Fun fact, if it's between two slices of bread, it's FDA. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Who's to say? Depends on whether it's hinged or not and how the USDA inspectors feel on that day.
Pizza?
I know, right? So USDA is 9 CFR. FDA is 21 CFR. And then also we've got Canadian regulations too, and that's on the Health Canada. So it really depends on what you're doing, but for the most part, it's going to be your 21 CFR 101. Is going to have all of your labeling regulations. It will reference some other regulations that might be outside of 21 CFR, but it'll at least tell you where to go from there. So it's a little bit of a choose your own story situation where you go through and it'd be like, well, if you're doing this CFR and you go, oh, what's in that CFR? And you go look and then you come back. So you really have to love going on a journey to be in regulatory labeling compliance.
Yeah, it's just, so for me, the hardest area to navigate around, is this a compliant label or not? It's just all the requirements around the principal display panel and what's allowed on the front label and the arrangement and the font size of the nutritional panel. And it seems like the nutrition facts, I guess I call them now, is changing constantly. And companies trying to figure out exactly what needs to go there and claims. And we'll kind of get into some of the pitfalls around that. I was just kind of thinking about too, Colleen. So working in dairy, we were always referring back to standards of identity. So there are a few products that are listed in 21 CFR when back at the time they wanted to kind of codify these. So you had low part skim mozzarella and whole fat mozzarella and that was it. I mean, if you didn't hit these targets, it wasn't that product. It was outside of that identity. And a funny thing, here's a little tip for consumers on a lot of dairy products, is what companies started doing then is going outside of the standards of identity, but changing the name. So if you pick up a container of whipped cream cheese, for example, it's not cream cheese, it's cream cheese spread. So it's got higher moisture, it's got It doesn't meet the standard of identity, and that's why they changed the name to make sure that it's not fitting under those criteria.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot also with ice cream. I've seen some creative uses of the word gelato because there are standards for ice cream. And sometimes it won't meet the minimum butterfat content to be called ice cream, but it qualifies for low-fat ice cream. Well, people don't want to say low-fat ice cream because then people will think it tastes bad. Well, what else can we say? And so then you have to start trying to get creative. And they're like, can we call it gelato? And you're like, I guess, but there's kind of a culinary standard. Is there a regulatory standard? No. Okay, let's call it gelato. And so then you get into this situation where everything's being called gelato or frozen dairy dessert, or choco taco, whatever. And so it's all because we couldn't meet the standard of identity to call it ice cream.
Yeah. Well, and then on that side of it too is like plant-based versions of these products. Soy ice cream or what have you. It's not even, it's not so they're trying to name it in that category so people have that reference in the marketplace and they understand what their product is meant to, what market it's meant to fulfill, right? What niche it's in. And that can get really confusing as well. Not to mention, this is a weird sidebar too, is AOCs. So brands that are linked to a particular region and naming them. Feta cheese. Feta cheese is Greek. And if you call your product feta in the United States, you can't. Why do they call, in the US, this is a sparkling wine, and they don't call it champagne? Because champagne comes from the Champagne region in France, and that is it. And so you have a lot of creative naming in those areas too.
This isn't really related to regulatory, but I thought it was pretty funny. When my husband and I were just engaged, I felt weird about saying fiance. And my husband said, well, fiancés only come from the fiance region of France. So I'll just be your sparkling boyfriend. And so feel free to use that one if you guys would like.
So really, and this kind of gets back to the parallels with regulatory between food safety and quality assurance, in that there's certain things that we know on the regulatory and labeling side of things that are no-goes. And it's just like, wham, right? This is a food safety issue. This is an absolute no-no. You cannot do this. We understand where to dig our heels in. When you get to the claim side of things, there's some gray area. And part of what we need to do on the business side, and this is, I think, where we provide our most effective benefit to the company, is helping those groups understand where that line is. And it's like, okay, well, you can you got a little bit of wiggle room here based upon the marketplace and what FDA is upset about currently and things like this. It's not a guarantee, but your risk of actually getting hit on the head by the government is probably relatively small. I've referred to this on the chat before. So head of quality assurance and legal, we were pretty much married at the hip in large companies. And I would get this all the time. So the marketing people would come to me and say, can I make this claim? And I'd say, no, you can't. And a lot of times I would get back kind of the upset kid response, be like, well, the other companies are doing it. It's like, well, if the other companies jumped off a cliff, would you do that too? And so it would be back and forth between Roger and myself. And so depending on who they went to first, he'd be like, hey, Brian, can we make this claim? No. And then they would go to Roger. Roger, can we make this claim? Well, have you talked with Brian? Well, yeah. What did he say? Well, he said no. Okay, well then quit wasting my time. So we'd set up a pretty good defense on that side. But just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. You have to think of the brand and your company and how you protect these things. There's a lot of times where there's crackdowns in these areas and then companies are really caught. But that marketing pressure can be extreme. They're trying to figure out a way to separate themselves from the pack. It's kind of like if you own a pizzeria, there's a bazillion pizzerias in town. You've got to figure out some way to make your pizzeria a little bit different, right? You've got to, hey, come to our restaurant. We got a guy in the back who's spinning the dough, and you can watch him spin the dough or something. You got to come up with something to make yourself a little different. And that's a big chunk of what the marketing people do, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think it's always helpful to give them some ideas, kind of plant the seeds if you can. So it's almost like you're keeping them on the paved road and keeping them off of the dirt road, because they're always going to want to go the dirt road because nobody else is going there. And you have to explain, well, the reason nobody is going in that direction is because it's either not quite compliant, or it's, the mantra I always have, is it truthful and not misleading? And if I can get that kind of drummed into their head every time they're asking the question before they come to me, is it truthful and not misleading? And if it is, maybe move it a little bit closer to that truthful and not misleading before you come to me. Or, they can always come to me and ask, like, how do I get there? How do I make this better? This feels not truthful or potentially misleading. Good job.
Yeah, on those claims side of things, for certain things there's very definite rules of good source of, and these there are very delineated rules around those. And on that side, kind of going on the dirt road, is things that are very ambiguous. Healthy. What does that mean? Superfood. Oh my God, superfood. Go away, soup. Oh, that for me is just a huge warning. That's a red flag right there. So they come up with words that don't mean anything, but sound like they do mean something. And that kind of gets into that gray area. That's, you're kind of being deceptive when you do stuff like that. And you can get in real trouble, right? So there was like the Terra flower down in South America, right? That, oh man, that ended up being a huge, huge problem. Naming of products, how you're designing your artwork, all of these type of things. That entire label that you're putting on your product ends up being kind of, you have how am I thinking of this? You have all these little pieces of different things on that label, Colleen, that need to come together to be a cohesive whole. The nutrition panel needs to be buttoned up and needs to be exactly right. And even then, how you decide to round things, sometimes you have some wiggle room on if you go up or down. Sometimes if you have a product and you're close enough on that serving size at that 0.5 gram, where you could technically round it down to 0, but that can be kind of deceptive too. There's some in there, right? So maybe you should keep it at the 0.5. You don't want to confuse
especially if you're making a claim.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something I always try and keep in mind is when you do have maybe a little bit of wiggle room on one of those nutrient values, yes, you could go up or down, but are you making a claim? Is it an absence of, or that it contains this? If it's a contains, we're going to round down because we want to have the most accurate information. If it's the absence of, I'm going to round up. And sometimes marketers don't like that. And so you have to explain, well, let's over declare or under declare, because we can't declare exactly that. We do have to round it. It's a little bit of a hairy conversation, and that's where the relationships come in. I think it's so important to build those relationships.
Part of that is being consistent. And my goal always is, if someone's going to come and ask me a question, I want them to have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to say before they even get there. And it's the same in your area too. It's like, all right, well, what does Colleen think of that? Okay, well, here's what she's going to say. Yeah, she said, okay, right. That's the consistency you want in these type of processes. A little funny story on the labeling side of things is, you got to check everything on that label to make sure that it's correct. There was a company I worked with in the past, and they had their 800 number on the packaging. So it was the name of the company 1-800-Leprino. And then underneath it, they put in parentheses the phone number. Well, when they put the label, 2 of the numbers on the phone number got switched by accident. The phone number went to an adult line.
Oh, no.
Can you imagine? So that was a huge mistake, right? Very simple, easy to make, which cost a lot of money, right? Because now all those labels, garbage, all of that garbage. And they only found out about it after a consumer called the number. Yeah. Good times. So, gosh, time is flying here, Colleen. So we're already at the 5-minute mark here. So let's bring this up to the 30,000 foot level. Fascinating conversation here. What would you like to leave people with here today?
Well, I made some notes. Let me go look at them real quick. So I think since most of the people that are probably listening to this are food safety experts, kind of build those relationships with your regulatory counterpart. Like, I always think of us as like cousins in the greater org structure. A lot of the stuff that we're looking at is very similar, and there is some context that I think food safety folks can provide for regulatory and vice versa. So, listen out for each other, build those relationships. And then also, keeping guidance in context, making sure that if your regulatory person says something, know that it's completely based off of the context. And if anything changes, the country, the size of the label, the size of the package, one ingredient, that entire context could change. And so always kind of checking in, does this change your previous guidance? And don't make any assumptions, because there's some weird stuff out there. And also, making sure that you're keeping on top of what's happening. I know in my career, not a ton had happened in regulatory changes. And in the last, 5 to 10 years, we've seen some changes. We had nutrition facts panel format changes. And now we've got some political changes that are potentially going to change the way we're doing GRAS assessments and what ingredients are allowed. So that'll be really interesting. And there's going to, a lot more regulatory labeling folks are going to need to hitch up their giddy up and get going. And then also always think about your end consumer. Would you want your dad to have this product? Would this be clear for your dad to read? Assuming your dad isn't a regulatory labeling compliance expert. But I had something like that happen where he's feeding my niece some cereal puffs that were called sweet potato flavored. And I had to explain to my dad why there wasn't any sweet potato in the ingredient statement, because it was sweet potato flavored. So is it allowed? Sure. Is it the right thing to do? Maybe not.
Yeah, and just like in food safety and quality assurance, these things tend to work themselves out in the end. So make sure and do the right thing. Doing the right thing up front, I think, is really where I think this is why quality, food safety, regulatory, and compliance, why we work so closely together, because we're doing a lot of the same things to protect the company and make sure the consumers are getting what they expect. And a lot of times we're involved too early in the process. And I think that's kind of one of our key takeaways for here today is get involved early. Go stick your nose in the marketing office and say, hey guys, what you doing? And that's going to make your life so much easier. And part of this is, again, you're part of the company. And your job is to make the company successful and have an awesome brand and make sure that we have happy customers and that our products are safe for them and all these wonderful things that we do. And that takes a lot of work. And having a good process in place in your company is paramount to success. So be part of that success. Let's see here. I pulled up your website here for everybody so that they can go check out your work. And definitely having a good resource for labeling and compliance is worth its weight in gold. So thank you, definitely, Colleen, for all that you do. So there's that site. So we're going to close out our chat here for this week. Thank you, Colleen, for joining us. Fantastic conversation.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody. Great feedback here and great questions, of course, as usual, guys. Very well appreciated. So we're off to a good start here in 2026 for sure. So in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Next week, everybody's going to hit the ground running. It's going to be a brand new year. Things are going to be awesome and you're done to do a great job. But in the meantime, have a good time this weekend. And we will, of course, see you back here next Friday at the same time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, while I'll bring another amazing guest onto the chat like Colleen. And we'll talk about all things food safety, QA, and everything else that makes food great. So we will see you then, everybody. Have a good one.